Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a totally fascinating political paradox. It's a situation driven by some seriously complex data and honestly, deep voter dissatisfaction. We're basically looking at a landscape where the old political playbooks are just being completely torn up and rewritten. So if you think you've got a handle on the traditional left and right divides of modern politics, well, prepare to have those assumptions completely flipped by the numbers we're going to look at today.
Okay, let's kick things off with the hard numbers from the recent post-budget Redbridge survey. And wow, the data here is staggering. It shows One Nation surging right past traditional political giants to become the most popular primary party, sitting at 31%. They've literally jumped 4 points. Meanwhile, Labour has fallen to 28%, and the coalition is trailing way down at 20%. Look, this isn't just a minor fluctuation. This is a massive, seismic shift in primary voting intentions.
Now, what makes this even more intriguing is how close the gap actually gets when you look at the bigger picture. In a hypothetical two-party matchup against Labour, Labour is only marginally ahead of One Nation by a razor-thin 51 to 49 margin. Yeah, 51 to 49. It really indicates that this primary vote surge isn't just some random protest vote, It has immense real-world competitive weight when push comes to shove.
Section 1. A global populist trend. To truly grasp what's going on here, we kind of have to zoom out for a second. Because this local surge is not an isolated thing. It perfectly mirrors a sweeping international realignment across wealthier, developed nations. Looking across the globe, the political right is fragmenting heavily, from the Reform Party gaining serious local electoral ground over in the UK, which, by the way, is happening alongside massive, heavily policed protests in London, to the rise of the AfD in Germany, and of course, One Nation here in Australia. It's this synchronized pattern of voters actively seeking alternatives totally outside the traditional mainstream conservative parties.
Section 2. The identity politics paradox. So who exactly is driving this global shift? Well, get ready for this one. According to a massive survey of 60,000 people conducted by the Berliner, a progressive English-language publication over in Germany, nearly 28% of the LGBTQI community there is willing to vote for the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, or the AfD. Nearly 28%. Historically, this community has leaned heavily toward progressive politics, right? So making this almost one-third voting bloc a stunning, completely unexpected statistical revelation.
The crucial question here is, why on earth is this happening? Well, the survey data points to a few key factors. First off, the traditional center-right and center-left parties have just been hollowed out. Voters are abandoning the middle in droves. Interestingly, the traditionally progressive Greens trail in second place at 19.9% among this demographic. But perhaps the most surprising part? This shift is reportedly being driven by deep concerns within the LGBTQI community that certain migrant populations might actively roll back progressive LGBTQI rights.
And honestly, this next point just brilliantly illustrates the sheer complexity of this new landscape. The AfD's own proposed chancellor candidate, Alice Weidel, is an openly gay woman. Let that sink in. The demographics of right-wing populism are evolving in ways that literally defy all of our historical expectations.
But we don't just have to look all the way to Germany to see this. We are watching this exact same paradox play out directly in Australian politics right now. Specifically with Jason Virco, a newly elected One Nation Member of Parliament in South Australia.
Let's take a closer look at Virgo's personal profile. So he's a newly elected lower house MP for One Nation. He is openly gay, and he is married to a proud Muslim Australian. I mean, talk about a profile that profoundly challenges the traditional, stereotypical expectations of what a right-wing populist candidate is supposed to look like or stand for, right?
It gets even more interesting. During his maiden speech in Parliament, he openly praised migrants. He literally stated, "I love migrants. The overwhelming majority is simply searching for a better life." He acknowledged immigrants from China, India, and the Philippines. Yet, mere minutes later in that same speech, he simultaneously thanked Senator Pauline Hanson for creating the One Nation movement.
To really understand how fractured this whole political space is right now, just consider this comparison. On one side, you have Jason Virgo, an openly gay One Nation MP actively praising migrants. Then, on the exact same team, you have the leader of his own state party, Cory Bernardi, who has historically campaigned heavily against marriage equality. It really highlights that a party's appeal right now isn't necessarily bound by a single, unified ideological stance on social issues anymore. It's pulling from entirely different and often totally opposing demographics.
Section 3. Hanson's lower house ambitions.
So capitalizing on this sort of chaotic momentum in these shifting demographics, party leaders are starting to formulate incredibly ambitious and honestly highly disruptive electoral strategies. For instance, speculation is seriously mounting that One Nation leader Pauline Hanson will leave the Senate to contest the lower house seat of Capricornia at the next federal election. And this isn't just a wild rumor. She's actually already set up a taxpayer-funded elected office in nearby Yapoon, right beside the electorate.
Now, here is where it gets highly strategic. If she runs, she could potentially face off against the Nationals' Matt Canavan, who, word has it, might also leave the Senate to run for that exact same lower house seat if the current MP retires. This sets up a completely fascinating, high-stakes battle between two very high-profile conservative leaders fighting over the exact same voters. It is a massive gamble for the conservative base.
Section 4. The root of dissatisfaction.
Okay, to truly understand this political realignment across the board, we really have to look past the surface of identity politics and all these electoral games. What we are witnessing is the immense soft power of these populist movements. This isn't just about single-issue voting on things like immigration anymore. It's fueled by a profound, pervasive feeling that the entire political class is totally out of touch and just doesn't work for the average citizen. It's that nagging sentiment that politicians are only in it for themselves, not the people.
And honestly, you can absolutely see why that sentiment exists when you think about this staggering economic contrast. Get this, after recent pay bumps for politicians and public servants, the Prime Minister now earns over $620,000 a year. Let's contrast that with the median salary for many women in the country, which sits somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000.
So the really crucial point here is the multiplier. The Prime Minister is making approximately 6 times the average full-time wage. When voters are sitting at home watching ministerial salaries increasing by tens of thousands of dollars while they're literally struggling to pay the bills, it creates immense frustration. It builds this total disconnect between the working-class voter and the political establishment.
This severe economic and cultural disconnect is totally fracturing traditional electoral boundaries. For example, let's look back at the marriage equality vote. 17 electorates voted no, and a very large portion of those were heavy migrant, working-class areas in Western Sydney. Or look at an electorate like Wills, which is split right down the middle between affluent, progressive voters in areas like Brunswick and more conservative, blue-collar, immigrant-heavy communities. The old, clean lines of left and right, they simply don't apply neatly to these divided communities anymore.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for today's explainer. As we look toward the upcoming state and federal elections, we really have to ask ourselves, are these paradoxes, openly gay right-wing MPs, staggering shifts in primary votes, and deep economic resentment, are they just a temporary disruption, or are we looking at the permanent new reality of our global political landscape?